Were people brainwashed to a level to believe Tutsis were of a lower class, or that Tutsis were evil?
It was mainly that Tutsis were evil, and it was being taught every day from childhood. A man called Bagosora and others who were extremists, who were in the government, he actually told people directly, including our own people who were in Arusha negotiations, that he's going back home to continue preparation for an apocalypse.
Did you know about the plans for the genocide?
Yes, we discussed that with the UN people.
What did the UN say?
The UN is what it is. It is composed of these people who are even behind.
So he came 20 minutes after a massacre?
Yeah. Tony managed to save 14 who were also injured and were lying in the dead bodies, but still alive. Everything was literally dead. You would see dead bodies being eaten by dogs.
When we looked at the map, and I was looking with my girlfriend, we're looking at the map, and then we're just looking like you had to zoom in so Rwanda's name even shows up.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then for Congo's problem to, I think one of your advisors called it, Rwanda became the scapegoat for Congo for all their problems.
For all these years.
Which made me, and we'll get to Congo because I want to focus on other things.
Sure.
But then I understood when you always avoided the same question, because you knew where they're coming from and the purpose they're asking the question.
Yeah.
So then it made sense. Rwanda's story is beyond heartbreaking. It's hard to fathom what happened here only 30 years ago when pretty much everyone here was alive. And it took me, even though I've seen all the documentaries, I've watched all the videos, it took me the process of going through the museum for 3 hours and seeing the images, hearing the story, to understand the brutality of what humans are capable of. That's the scary part. I think that's something you're gonna, understood to allow you to rebuild the country, is that those people are like us. That's probably something I'd want to ask you about, is how could people, same species, us, do these things? But a lot of people in the West don't even understand, don't know the story. So let's begin with, I'll try to oversimplify it, and then I'd love you to dig into the history. So Rwanda was colonized by Belgians.
After first Germans,
then Belgian.
Handed over to Belgians.
Okay. And then what Belgians did, and that's what's crazy to me, is they essentially created those ethnicities. They didn't really exist as ethnicities. And they called them Tutsis, Hutus, and Twas. And they used eugenics to kind of differentiate between them. The size of your nose, your height, which is difficult for the younger generation to comprehend. And then it became political as they divided those ethnicities. The Tutsis, under Belgian colonization, the Tutsis were, even though they were the minority, about 15% of the population, they were, above the Hutus. They were in the governmental positions. They were seen as the higher race. That's how the Belgians portrayed it. And then when Rwanda gained independence, all hell broke loose and the Hutus took power. The fighting began, mainly the killing of Tutsis. That led to 1994, where 1 million Rwandans, mostly Tutsis, were killed over 100 days. So my first question to you, Mr. President, is maybe offer more context to the story before 1994. What led humans in this country to kill fellow humans, neighbors, friends, wives, husbands, at such a massive scale, at such a brutal way? What led to that?
In fact, what led to that, to the killings, fellow humans killing fellow humans, is, and it's not confined to Rwanda. And you have rightly put it, it has a connection with the colonial history. So that means the ideas also came from outside. Maybe let's say in Europe where the Belgians are found, they are also divided like that, and they would probably cause problems to each other, whether killings or different things, because of how different one group is from the other. But with Rwanda, in fact, the divide in a society has been there before that. It used to exist even before. And the divide was based on occupation, if you will. Some were cattle keepers, others farmers.
The Tutsis were the cattle keepers,
Yeah, cattle
the
keepers.
Hutus were the farmers,
Yes.
and the Twas, I think, were the...
Were involved in the pottery
Pottery, yeah.
and things like that. So it existed. What the colonialists did was to come and radicalize that division and make it political. And divisions happen everywhere. I mean, you find each country. In fact, for us, you are talking about 3 groups. There are countries that have hundreds of groups.
Congo has many.
It has 250 or 300, something like that. So it's about the politicization of that divide. That's what causes problems. And that's what happened here. And then around that, who is in control, who has the power. And it is not, then it's not power for good reasons. It is power for your identity and against others. But why should it be like that? It means it is bad politics. Otherwise, for good politics, you can be different, but still relate to the other who is different than you, to cooperate and do things, especially when you belong to one nation like Rwanda.
Mm.
So anyway, the whole history and the story about Rwanda comes from pre-colonial times, then colonial times, then
Post-independence.
Post-independence. Post-independence continued what was planted here by the Belgians, and that was the politics. And that's how, by the way, let's say, me personally, I became a refugee in a neighboring country,
Uganda,
when I was 4 years old. My family went into exile like many other families who went to different countries. Many went to Uganda like me, others to other countries in the region, including Congo and Tanzania, Burundi, and so on. So, but many were born there. Some of these people are very young. They were born to parents in exile. And owing to that divide that was really radicalized politically, and one group taking over and saying the others should not exist. And to others, the Belgian, the former colonial masters, if I may use that, bear huge responsibility because they presided over that. So changing hands as regards power, and they supported one group against another, and so on and so forth. So, but that's not enough. For me, I wouldn't even want to blame the outsiders for our problems, because, well, if the outsiders came with their problems and we accepted or we embraced them and continued with what problems they brought to us, it is also largely our fault. So, but those who took over post-independence, after independence, just played the same divide and rule. politics as the Belgians.
So those were the Hutu extremists that took
Yes,
over in the
yes,
1950s.
yes.
And what they did, if I get anything, please correct me if I get something wrong. They kicked out all the Tutsis from government, and they started.
They would deny them going to school, business, or anything. They would just, if you grow up, maybe they would be entitled to studying in primary school, and then after that,
I was listening to a video of a child saying how she didn't know her brothers were very intelligent, but they were not allowed to go into high school. She never understood. She didn't know what Tutsi meant.
Yeah.
And then she slowly realized.
Yeah. They would not even leave the country to go elsewhere to look for an opportunity. So they are confined here.
And it got so ugly that by the 1990s, and there's been many massacres from 1950 to the 90s, they're obviously they're dwarfed by what happened in 1994. But Tutsis were being called cockroaches. The media was labeling them as such. Catholic Church played a key role in what happened in 1994 and what led to 1994, spreading that hate. And eventually we see in 1994, they participated in the massacre.
Yeah.
The churches were used to lure in Tutsis.
The massacres were done in churches, church buildings.
So the question that I have, though, is how, like I still don't understand, and despite everything, all the research I've done is, how could that hate go to that level where they start killing their neighbors, their friends? Like, what was were people brainwashed to a level to believe Tutsis were of a lower class, or that Tutsis were evil, or that Tutsis were not Africans? What was it?
It was mainly that Tutsis were evil. Simply that. And it was being taught every day from childhood. And then the politicians who thought playing that divisive political card was going to put them into power, and they just embraced it. By the way, we are talking about that time, but even now, I'm sure maybe if you followed what is going on in Eastern Congo, we will come to the Congo, but the same thing. The same hate speech, the same killings, the same persecution of people.
And the RPF, I think it's called. Not RPF, what's the group called? The one that was leading the FDLR.
Yes, FDLR.
Which are the people, they're the same people that had the mentality that led to the genocide in 1994.
Actually, most of them left here, those who were old enough. Maybe you might have seen recently, yesterday or the other day, they brought some of them who were captured in the fighting in Eastern Congo.
One of the generals.
Yes. Some of them, those who were old enough, went and stayed and grew up there and have been organizing and working with the government in Congo. The young ones also grew up in the hands of their parents or relatives, and they were taught to do the same. So
that same brainwash mentality.
Exactly, it's brainwashing, nothing else.
So we go back to the 90s to what led to that horrific year of 1994. The constant killings were happening, and what we found out is they started planning for the genocide. So they had lists of names of people they want to kill, especially different leaders, and they even rehearsed how to kill as many people as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And that's when the RPF, the group that was formed in Uganda, and that you became eventually the leader of, and you were one of the commanders, was formed to fight the Hutu government. So Hutus took power in the 1950s when the Belgians left. They were very ruthless, not Hutus, extremist Hutus, very different because there's moderate Hutus as well. And the extremist Hutus were just killing off Tutsis. Again, for people listening, both were Rwandans, were citizens of Rwanda. There's really no difference. No religious differences. They don't look any different, to be honest. And by 1994, what happened is, you guys, the RPF, was signing a peace agreement with the president at the time. And this is a pretty important story because that's what triggered the genocide, allegedly. So the agreement was signed in late 1993 and was being implemented. And then the president's plane was shot down. There's different theories on who shot it down. And the genocide began. So before we go into the genocide, Can you tell me about that period, about the peace agreement? I saw photos of you at the UN, I think it was, signing the deal. So were you guys hopeful back then? Did you believe that that peace agreement between the Tutsis and the Hutus was legitimate and was going to be executed, was going to be implemented? I'd love to hear the story then, and then the day that the president died.
First, the president died in 1994.
Yes. April, I think it was.
Yes, the peace agreement was reached in 93. But before the peace agreement was signed, months before, there was breakdown of that process, the peace process, in a sense that massacres, relatively, I mean, it's a genocide, actually, of people was happening based on their ethnic background. In 93, I remember the peace process broke down in 1993, February. So, and because of those killings in a place called Chibirira in the northwest, there were these ethnic Tutsis who were living there and they were massacred. So our people were asking, said, we are here talking about peace and how to bring about peace. At the same time, you are continuing the killings. So what are we doing here negotiating a peace settlement if you're not going to stop killings? That's what broke down the... And around that time, a man called Bagosora and others who were part of this, these were the extremists who were in the government. Not only was he heard saying things, he actually told people directly, including our own people who were in Arusha for negotiations, that he's going back home to continue preparation for an apocalypse, as he called it. So this was way before Habyarimana died. So this is, I'm just saying this because so people don't keep getting confused that genocide had anything to do with the shooting down of the plane.
It was planned well before.
It was planned well before. It was known. Yeah. In fact, that's the time they started training and preparing militias that would work together with the government soldiers then to kill people. And the people's names, lists had been drawn. They had been recorded down, those they would go to kill, way before the plane was shot down. But in any case, even if we don't go by this period, which was 30 years ago, when I was mentioning to you that I became a refugee when I was 4 years old, another genocide was actually happening at the time. They were killing people. That's how people fled and went into different parts of the region and the world. So that put aside, there's nothing to do with the airplane that really...
The airplane was used more as a pretext.
It was a pretext. It was just maybe...
So there's two theories there. I'll just kind of explain the two theories. One is that the RPF, your group, shot down the plane and that's what triggered the genocide. And the other theory, which has a lot more substance to it, is that the genocide was planned well before. I think it was known that the genocide was planned, but that internally there was probably a power struggle and the Hutus killed their own leader. And the latest, so there's one French investigation. Initially they blamed you, but then later they reversed that decision and they blamed the Hutus. So essentially the story is that the Hutus planned the genocide. They shot down the plane of the president, who was a Hutu, who was, I was told that he was also an extremist. So he was also planning the genocide as well. But then the reason they killed him is first power struggle, potentially someone else to gain power and internal conflict, and to have a pretext for the genocide.
If people want to go by facts, that's what I mentioned. That's why I was mentioning that this man later on, who actually was even tried in the court, international tribunal for Rwanda that was formed by the UN, Bagosora, was the architect. You were wrong, he was part of that, and they had been doing it way before 1993, 1994. So by fax, and then he was telling people in broad daylight in Arusha. If you ask the Tanzanian officials who were there then, they will tell you the story. Those of us who, our people, the RPF people who were attending the peace talks on behalf of RPF, they will tell you the man came and told them that. And
Told them what? That
they are going, when I talked of him going to prepare an apocalypse.
That was the commander, the one that worked for the president,
Yeah, he was the head of, he's known, he was tried for that. He's in Arusha. So these are facts. We can't change the story. People can't change the story.
Did you know about it at the time when you were the leader? When you were one of the leaders at the RFP, did you know about the plans? The RPF, sorry. Did you know about the plans for the genocide?
Yes, we discussed that with the UN people. In fact, if you met General Darer, the Canadian commander, was in charge of the UN forces, he will tell you the story. We used to meet, we used to discuss this, we used to share information of what is being prepared way back, like, in fact, as far as 1992, 91.
What did the UN say?
I can't know what the UN would say on anything. The UN is UN. So I don't know.
What do you mean by that? Like, do you mean they're not as...
The UN is what it is. It is composed of these people who are even behind, you know that in the genocide, the French who got involved as well, the Belgians were involved, and they are the ones who sometimes influence or dictate what happens at the UN. I'll give you even another example. At the height of the killings, are you aware that the UN force was here between 5,000 and 6,000 troops? At the height of the killings, they removed all the troops and there remained only 250 UN peacekeepers, from 5,000+ to 250.
Why?
Because they were not able or they were not willing to do anything to stop the genocide.
Or could they have been ignorant to not realize the genocide was going to happen?
But I'm telling you, the commander of the force,
he sent a warning to the UN.
Yeah, several times. There are cables. They are recorded. They are
I remember as a kid in the 90s, in the 2000s, I wanted to work for the UN. So I really had that image of the UN being the peacekeeping force. And I'm sure they do a lot of good. But what you're saying is that it's a flawed. Sometimes they do good, and would you agree? Sometimes they do good, sometimes they don't do good.
Sometimes it may mean rarely, but let's go with sometimes.
So, why would the Belgians and the French not want to stop a genocide? Or some people say
you can see the connection ideologically from the beginning. If the Belgians were linked with this divisive politics from the beginning, you understand that. The second, with the French, in fact, the president then was President Mitterrand. He was a very close friend of Habyarimana, the president who died in the plane crash. Very close. One was like a father figure to the other. So, and he had bought into that kind of politics.
What politics? That the Tutsis are...
The genocide ideology is a politics.
But it's hard to imagine a French president.
It is hard, but with the lessons of history, the French president is no different than any other president, including that one of where they kill people.
Have you spoken to the French president at all?
We have. You mean the one who was...
The one that was friends with the president, that the Javier, the one that died in the plane crash?
No, but I met very many senior officials around him and his son, who was also a big figure in politics of France into Africa.
So then we get it to the genocide. I think that's the worst part of humanity one could imagine. I think this is it. If you had to describe hell, this was it. It was described in the documentary. A journalist was like, I looked hell right in the eyes. So the message that was spread by radio stations, by the church, the Catholic Church, there were code words to kill Tutsis. So once the president's plane crashed, within days, it began. It was all planned, rehearsed, not just planned. They said, cut down all the trees, get to work. These were code words, not sure if there's others, essentially to slaughter, to kill as many Tutsis as possible. There was even like 10 commandments, and that included things like kill your neighbor, anyone. And if you married a Tutsi, you have to kill your wife and the kids.
And it happened. It did happen. That way, yes. And the kids, they would look at, if the father was a genocidaire, they would look at the kids who look like him, those are spared, and then they kill the mother and those who look like the mother.
And not just kill. The way they were killed was just brutal. You know, when...
Of course.
So there's a difference between holding a gun and shooting someone in the head versus pressing a button in the Oval Office or whatever, and then a bomb drops somewhere and kills people. It takes a lot more for you to actually be able to kill someone with your own hands. And that's what happened in Rwanda. Those babies, when I went through the museum, babies were held and their heads were literally smashed.
It was very brutal. It doesn't have an explanation. It can't be comprehended by anyone.
And so was there any reports of drugs being used to allow people to do those brutal things? Or was it just...
Maybe some would be on drugs, but you can't have a whole population on drugs. There must have been, people, probably more people who were not on drugs than those who were on drugs, but doing the same things as if they are on drugs. And let me clarify this, because you see, the politics behind the genocide is served by those who they are into it and extremists who are doing it. But when it comes, and that also brings in even the outsiders, like I said, a section of the Belgians and the other of the French who are really active in fueling that. But the rest of the world, even going by the example, say, of United States, you will not find people who from United States were actively involved or participating in the genocide. It's another angle now to this argument. The angle is, and I think we see it more or less every day for a long time, and it's like they didn't care. They just thought this, and it happens in the politics even of today. It's like these Africans
the French president
killing each other. And
the French president said, in this place, these things happen. That was a quote from the French president.
Yeah. Even at the UN, the arguments were there, and including the Secretary General then, who said, oh, this is just Hutus killing Tutsis and Tutsis killing Hutus.
They were not looked at as human.
So it's like, no, it's like these are brutal animals, so to speak. They are not human beings. So meaning all of us are like that. So this is what, so the simple, this divide in the mentality, some are inferior, others are superior, and the Africans, the Rwandans at that time, it's like, who cares? Because to prove that, you talked about the radio that was fueling this and
cut down all the trees and,
and so
kill the
on.
cockroaches.
There was even a discussion about saying, why can't even this radio be jammed and it stops spreading this hate speech? And it came from the United States. Some people say, that's too much money to I think they even put a figure to it. It would cost them $250,000 US. So that was too much to save people. So why do they get bothered with that? That shows the dismissive nature of. We are talking about here some human beings killing each other and very brutal people that have known each other, lived with each other, and so on and so forth. But how about those outside, otherwise unrelated, otherwise with the possibility and the capacity to stop that happening, being dismissive about it and say, why should I spend $250,000 to save 1 million people?
To an extent, that's still happening.
You know what that it is still happening.
It's still happening in Congo, but how does it make you and people here feel? How did it make you feel at the time as well?
We feel, we live our lives and as happy as we can. But we never forget the lessons of our history. We've learned a lot, I mean a lot, so that we know how to value life as well. We know what having a life means. I know what being a refugee means. I know what losing a life means, because I have seen it in this genocide. A number of my relatives, very close relatives, were killed. Every family in Rwanda, some of these people you meet, you have discussed, they have lost families. Some of them, the young people you see here, are left alone. They have nobody to look up to as a brother, sister, uncle, aunt. No, they're all gone. So, but we have to live. We have to bring ourselves together and live a life, but a life built on lessons learned. And that, in fact, you are there on your own. You are there for yourself. Don't be deceived by these outsiders who come, talking about human rights, freedoms, this, they're bringing things to you, No. There's nobody who can bring you a life. These are just masqueraders. They're just deceiving people. They tell lies. So we have to, based on those lessons, come together ourselves, do what we can for ourselves. And if there are friends, if there are people who are willing to work with us and contribute toward our development, we appreciate, but we know centrally we have to take care of ourselves.
And to continue with a few more examples, because I really want to focus on the brutality of what happened, because it should be a warning for not only Rwanda, for the rest of the world, of what humans under certain circumstances are capable of. There were stories of bishops that were luring people into churches, like, come here to church, and for safety, and people would go there and they'd get slaughtered. And you have hundreds or thousands of people being slaughtered time and time again. They lure people in, they kill them, they lure more people in, and they kill them. And you also had squads of men, so they would prepare squads of men that had AIDS, and those squads were tasked with raping Tutsi women to kill them through the disease. So obviously, rape was used as a weapon of war, and was used in a way to not only be able to rape and traumatize, but also give those women a slow, painful death. And you've got thousands of children that were born not knowing who their father is. You were a leader at the time of the RPF that was fighting the genocidal government at the time. How was it for you, knowing you had family members inside Rwanda as well in that time? How did you manage to, be able to go to sleep at night as a 30-something-year-old man?
Well, I think I'm a very lucky person at a personal level because I still manage my good sleep despite all this. But as you said, everything terrible that anyone could imagine was actually used during genocide. And another interesting part of life, when I mentioned the people who have just been brought in from Congo who were part of this genocide, actually one of them is the person who is responsible to have killed my aunt, a very known figure towards the southern part of our country. So I have these are incredible stories. And he's there. He's been brought. He was living there. He was known. He was put out there, but nobody cared until now. I mean, what do you do with that one? I think you apply justice as we know it. We can't. But as a person, I mean, a number of situations like these ones, they break so many people beyond even repair. But few can also be hardened by those lessons. And consciously, people may want to do everything the opposite of what terrible they have seen or heard or experienced. And that's what saves some situations, because the young people who took up arms with us, all of us, and fought for their country, and a number of them lost their families. But they are still fighting to save people they even don't know. There's that sense. What they endured cannot be repaid by doing similar things to others, but rather by doing the opposite, to preserve a life that you wanted preserved of yours at the time things like that happening against you, directed at you. So human beings, as you earlier said, are complicated. They are capable of terrible, unimaginable things, but also capable of doing things that will surprise you. You find a young man or a woman who participated in the fight to liberate our country, comes and finds everyone in their family is dead. They still keep their heads high and do the best they can for those who are living, the ones they don't even know.
There's a story that our common friend Christian said. It was a boy that hid. So his family was trying to save him. They're trying to save themselves. I'm not sure if he's told you that story. And the family knew they're going to die. So they were trying to escape, etc. But that was it for them. So they told the boy to hide. And then the boy was hiding and he saw them get killed in front of him and he ran away. So that was in 1994. And then when you guys took over, the RPF took over government, and the genocide ended, which we'll talk about how you managed to end the genocide, the boy wanted to do something good with his life. So he started going to school. But then he found out the bus driver of that school bus was the same person that butchered his family in front of his eyes. And I'm sure you've heard that story multiple times.
There are similar stories. It's not just one. There are similar stories like that.
How could you've rebuilt Rwanda not from scratch, as someone told me yesterday, it's from minus, because it's a damaged people.
No scratch.
And you rebuilt it into what some people are calling the Singapore or the UAE of Africa, into a safe, low crime country is advancing really well. It's got an incredible people. From the early days, when you walked into the capital city and you freed Rwanda from the genocidal rulers, how did you get your soldiers to not seek revenge? How did you convince them? I understand why you wouldn't want revenge, because it just doesn't make sense. Like, if
Yeah.
you keep killing people, you already killed a fifth of your population, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's again 1 million people in a country that has 5 million at the time. So 20% of the population, based on those numbers. So you really killing more people is not a solution.
Mhm.
But how did you manage to do that?
We managed to do that because it was not just one person thinking like that. The young people I said, who I was leading at the time, first of all, most of them knew why they were fighting. And there is always a conversation at the time, because if you are fighting a brutality like that one, you can't be the one seen to be doing the same. Otherwise, why did your people die, or why did you fight? So some of them really consciously knew, painful as to where, they knew we needed to be different, act differently. And the politics of it is what bears us out. So, but of course, there will be others, and justifiably so, who want to take it to those who really
Factions within your group that wanted to seek revenge.
yeah, there are many who do that.
I'm guessing many argued with you. There was many
But the
upset.
leadership had to step in. We had to step in and say, look, let's wait. There was no justice system in place operating. Let's wait for the time we have a system in place to try those people who did these things. But you can't take law in your hands. Otherwise, you will create chaos, or maybe we will see the same genocide of other people happening, like our own people were killed. So we are very firm on that. In fact, a number of some of these stories are just terrible. Some of them, we arrested those who got involved in that, pending trial when the system is in place. The others would kill those they thought killed their parents and kill themselves. They wouldn't wait to be arrested, to be taken, to be tried. That's how terrible the situation was.
That's crazy.
Yes.
So essentially, people that find out who murdered their family,
Yes.
they'd go,
Yeah.
they'd kill them,
Yeah.
and then knowing that you tried to build a legal system so even those people you wanted to punish, because hey, you broke the law, so they knew they're going to be punished for it, and they killed themselves.
Yes. A number of cases like that happened. They wouldn't wait to go to be taken to prison. It's like they made a decision. They lost their people. They also don't want to leave anyway, but they would rather punish those who killed their people. There were so many cases like that. That's how terrible the situation was.
Can you take me through your journey walking the streets of Rwanda and when you freed the country? What was it like? What were the people like? What were the sights that you came across?
There was no life to begin with. Everything was literally dead. You would see dead bodies being eaten by dogs, wild dogs, or others just on their own. That was the life. So, in fact, there was a film, I think, shot, I don't know what it changed to, it was sponsored by the UN or by somebody. They called it, the title was Shooting Dogs. Shooting dogs was ridiculing the peacekeepers, because the peacekeepers were here instead of saving people. They started shooting dogs that were eating the corpses of these people when they had been killed, the ones they were supposed to save. You get what I'm saying? Shooting dogs was ridiculing peacekeepers because they were shooting dogs that were eating corpses on the streets. Instead of these people fighting or shooting those who were killing the people, They waited to shoot the dogs that were eating the corpses of the people killed. So that was the situation. So for me, just even as a human being, I used to avoid certain scenes because, and the reason, even I used to tell my commanders that they should not bring these stories too much to me or to show me the scenes, because there was a case somewhere just before we captured the Kigali. There was, many people were killed, and then these genociders brought caterpillars, and they dug a big hole, and they were powering, caterpillars were just pushing people they had killed into this dump, if you. There were about 3,000 bodies they had been pushing into that. But our soldiers reached the place and they found people who had been injured but not completely dead, about 14 of them. They brought them out from the dead bodies.
They were in the grave, in the mass grave, there were
In the
people
mass
alive.
grave, yes. And so one of the commanders asked me to come and see what was going on. In fact, it was very fresh. It had just happened. The soldiers arrived maybe like 20 minutes or even 15 when they had finished doing that.
The massacre.
So
he came 20 minutes after a massacre was done.
Yeah. Yes.
So you could have saved thousands of people if you managed to somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. But only managed to save 14 who were also injured and were lying in the dead bodies, but still alive, and they brought them out. So as I went there and I saw what was going on, so I told my commanders never to call me again or tell me these stories. They should rather do what is right to do and keep it to themselves. And I told them the reasons. I said, I can't keep seeing such a scenes on a regular basis and make rational decisions that I should be making. So I need, even as a human being, to just save myself from being exposed to this constantly, because it would impair my judgment in the conduct of the war. So I'm just giving you this a measure of how I had to manage the situation, even about myself. And I avoided being exposed to some of those things, just not wanting to be influenced or made angry, and to remain sober so that I do the right thing at least.
So you don't let emotion overwhelm you and then potentially take you down a darker path.
I wanted to avoid that, yes.
I remember also a call that you received from your cousin, hopefully I get the story right, while you were going into Kagame, I think it was, and she was calling you, telling you like the genocidal troops are coming to her. And so you sent some troops to go try to help her and the people there. And before they got there, she called you. She's like, there's no point anymore to support us. And I'm guessing she was killed?
Yes, she was killed with 9 other people, the same family in the room. And I had days earlier, maybe weeks, I had communicated with the UN peacekeepers here, gave them the address, the location where these people are, and they said, and these people used to work for the UN.
The cousin?
Yeah.
Your cousin that was killed worked for the UN?
Yeah, she was called Florence. She had worked for UN for 17 years.
And they let her?
Yes.
What did they say to you on the phone, the UN?
No, I used to tell them to go, and you say, yeah, they are going to try. Later on, when I met one of the commanders, he told me, he said, we went there and found the roadblocks around the house. I said, you fellows with tanks, with APCs, you go and find militias and run away and don't save people? I thought that was the lowest point for anybody's integrity or respect.
So,
in fact, the man who was responsible for the killings of that one, I'm told he's now arrested in Belgium. He was arrested recently.
the UN member that didn't go to save your family?
No. The actual person who was leading a group that went and killed.
He was also arrested. So there's a lot of these guys are still alive in the FDLR.
They are very much alive. Some of them were in their 20s, 30s, you can imagine. So they are in their 60s.
I know that even this president, the one that had the plane shot down, and the relatives of other politicians that led this genocide and planned it, they're living in different European countries as well. Some were arrested, some were not.
Some are in US, Canada, Europe, they are there.
Is there efforts to try to get those people arrested right now?
We have tried everything with this government. This is why I was saying human beings are... There's human beings in one place you're talking about, but there's also human beings in different places that behave differently. I mean, the whole of Europe, you go to Canada, you go to United States, these people are there. And there are case files that have been sent to these countries about these people. And they have just...
Why?
I can't tell.
You don't know why.
When you have a chance and you can ask those people, you ask them for me why. There is a case, for example, that is in the UK that has been there for maybe last 15 years or so, maybe more. 5 people who actually got involved in genocide here. Somehow they found their way into UK. People developed case files, begged the UK to bring them or to send them to Arusha in Tanzania for the UN tribunal to try them. Nothing was done for those years. And we even begged the UK. We said, okay, why don't you try them yourselves? If you don't want to give them to Rwanda because you suspect whatever, that's fine. If you think the justice system that isn't working or politics will get involved. Said, but you have them in the UK. These are their files. Why don't you try them in your courts? Find them innocent and release them. But if you find them guilty, then it's up to you to decide what to do with them. Not up to now. Those cases have not been tried. We have talked to different leaders and administrations in UK about this. Nothing. It is the same.
That's so perplexing.
Yeah. It's not something I can explain. Maybe somebody else can explain it.
Another thing that I can't explain is why this genocide doesn't get more coverage internationally.
It doesn't, because, again, either there is complicit or...
No, but even if there's complicit...
People don't care.
Yeah.
The question is, I think they don't care.
That's one that...
Yes, it doesn't appeal to them. And so that's how life goes on. That's why when I said we have learned lessons, we've learned lessons about people, about politics, about so many things that go on. And ordinary people who have not been exposed to these things may actually not ever understand them.
Before moving on from the genocide, there's one more story I would like to hear related to the genocide that I'm fascinated by, is how they were able to execute it. So I know on general level, they shot down the plane of the president, so they had a pretext to begin the killing after they did all the training. And
by there had been killings even before.
Before, yes, and when they went all out,
yeah.
So when they shot down the plane to just go all out after they did the rehearsals, and they've been killing for a while, and then they went in, and the prime minister at the time, who was more moderate, I forgot her name. Agatha could be.
Agatha?
Agatha, yes.
Mm.
She gave a speech on radio calling for peace,
Mm.
and she had 10 Belgian peacekeepers. And they went in there, they tortured and killed the peacekeepers, and they either killed or tortured and killed the prime minister as well.
Yeah.
And then they started killing all the moderate politicians, all the ones that were against the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe give us an overview of what was the plan that was executed, what you found out at the time and afterwards, on how they managed to do it?
So they had planned it as I mentioned to you, and one they did a couple of things. One, across the country, they were marking homes of Tutsis in every village. They would also even go on the house, put a cross in the chalk, and so across the country. It's not just the city here. Then they trained over, it was estimated to be, at the time, over 150,000 militias, on top of between 50 and 60,000 soldiers. And each group had leaders, and they were given responsibility according to the geographical area of Rwanda, the map. So they were very meticulous in the preparation of this genocide. And so the leaders, they were known, if they were moderates. Some were said to be in the opposition, political parties. Others were just ordinary people who were Hutus, and they would expect them, therefore, to join in making sure that the genocide is executed properly, as they had planned. So this is how, and they were not making much secret about it, actually. They were doing most of the things in the open, and what was going around, and they used to have it in conversations. They would say, if anything, if the orders are given to go, the other one should go, the other one, and so on. Even like people like the prime minister, who was a Hutu but wasn't extremist, and they had expected her as a prime minister to be with the president and other ministers. Most of them were extremists, to join them in the execution of this plan. So they just waited for the orders to start it. And I'm saying this, that it was actually done well before the plane was shot down. I mean, these are facts, the dates and times and the story. And when, for example, reports were by cable were going to the UN from the UN commanders here, they were talking about all these preparations. They were reporting many meetings that were held by government officials or by government ministers, or in collaboration with the church leaders, or whatever it was. So they were very meticulous about this. So what else? I think it was well planned. It was well executed, if I may say. It was something that was in their politics, in their blood, in their hatred. Politics of hate is just something else.